In a small, unassuming town nestled at the edge of a dense forest, Mark, a young man with a passion for social media, decided to create a special TikTok video to celebrate Halloween. Little did he know that this choice would plunge him into a nightmare beyond his darkest fears. With a knack for storytelling and a loyal group of followers, Mark was excited about the prospect of creating the perfect Halloween content. He had recently moved to this quiet town, which was known for its unsettling legends and eerie tales surrounding the very forest that stretched ominously behind his house. As Halloween approached, Mark couldn't resist the temptation to explore the woods and share his adventure with his TikTok audience. Armed with his camera, he set off on a crisp autumn day, the leaves crunching beneath his sneakers. The eerie stillness of the forest interrupted only by the sound of his voice narrating the journey. He recorded everything: the gnarled branches, the rustling leaves, and the golden sunlight streaming through the thick canopy above. Mark's excitement was palpable, his face illuminated by the warm glow of the camera. He shared his plans to camp in the forest overnight, adding a touch of suspense to his content, and his followers eagerly tuned in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark set up his campsite. The atmosphere became eerier, and the shadows cast by the trees grew longer and darker. Despite his attempts to maintain his composure, Mark couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that he was being watched. It started with subtle signs: the snap of a twig, a fleeting glimpse of movement at the edge of his vision, and whispered voices that seemed to beckon from the depths of the forest. Each occurrence sent shivers down his spine, but he attributed them to his overactive imagination and continued filming. The following day, Mark resumed his hike, determined to capture the true essence of Halloween in the woods. As he ventured deeper, the sense of being watched intensified. Strange symbols etched into tree trunks, and cryptic signs littered the forest floor. His unease grew as he came across mysterious altars adorned with candles and unsettling offerings. That night, alone in his tent, Mark received a disturbing message on his TikTok account from a username he didn't recognize. It was a video, a compilation of clips from the forest, his own videos accompanied by a chilling caption, "I see you." Mark, terrified and alone, Mark watched the video, every hair on his body standing on end. It was a montage of his own experiences in the forest, each scene edited to reveal that he was never truly alone. The stalker had been there all along, lurking just beyond the frame. Mark disabled his phone's location settings, but it didn't stop the torment. His followers grew increasingly concerned as his TikTok account became a repository of haunting videos, the captions becoming more menacing with each post. Days turned into a nightmarish blur. As Mark realized he was hopelessly lost, the forest seemed to conspire against him, leading him in circles, and the messages from the stalker only intensified his fear. One evening, as he cowered in his tent, Mark spotted the stalker, a shadowy figure in a grotesque Halloween mask, shrouded by the trees. His pulse raced as he made a desperate run for it, but the forest seemed to twist and turn, guiding him deeper into its dark heart. Exhausted and terrified, Mark stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin hidden deep within the woods. Desperation drove him to seek shelter. Inside, he made a horrifying discovery: a room filled with photographs, not just of him, but of his family, his friends, and his life outside the forest. The stalker had been watching him for a long time, and the implications were chilling. With newfound determination, Mark fled the cabin and ran deeper into the forest. Guided by the eerie light of the full moon, in a twist of fate, he encountered a group of hikers, who immediately recognized his distress and called the authorities. The stalker was never found, leaving Mark with the haunting realization that darkness could find you even in the most remote places. He abandoned his TikTok account, haunted by the memory of his terrifying ordeal, and Halloween in that quiet town would forever be a season of shadows, secrets, and chilling legends. I'm Daniel, and I have this unique fascination with constructing little shacks deep in the heart of the woods. There's something about being enveloped by nature that has always thrilled me. One day, I set out for another of my solitary adventures. Filled with eager anticipation, the day was perfect, with the woods adorned in their autumn splendor, leaves bursting into vibrant shades of red, orange, and yellow. As I worked on my shack, I began to hear these strange, distant whispers. They were almost like echoes, secrets carried on the wind. Each time they reached my ears, they sent a shiver down my spine. But I tried to dismiss them as mere figments of my imagination. Night descended rapidly, leaving me alone in the pitch-black woods. The lanterns I had brought suddenly flickered and extinguished, leaving me in darkness. The whispers returned, even more ominous this time. Like the forest itself was harboring secrets it didn't want me to know. My flashlight decided to quit on me, leaving me completely disoriented and terrified. Panic gripped me, and I made a frantic dash back to my car, hoping it would provide some semblance of safety. But when I reached my car, it was as if the universe conspired against me. The engine stubbornly refused to roar to life. I was trapped in the woods, with nothing but the unnerving silence and the eerie whispers for company. My fear intensified, and I bolted towards the nearest gas station, praying for a glimmer of hope. When I finally arrived at the gas station, I was met with a scene straight out of a horror movie. It was deserted and gave off an incredibly eerie vibe. The flickering, buzzing fluorescent lights cast long, menacing shadows. I called out for help, but there was no response, just a haunting silence. My fear grew exponentially, and I began to hear things, strange, indistinct noises that made my skin crawl. In the hushed stillness of that forsaken gas station, the woods I had once cherished had metamorphosed into a living nightmare. The wind carried with it ghostly laughter, and voices that seemed to call out my name in a sinister tone. My mind began to unravel, and I found myself running deeper into the woods, unable to escape the relentless horrors that pursued me. Weeks turned into a haunting blur. I was finally found in a ditch, curled into a ball, muttering incomprehensible words. The voices and shadows in the woods had driven me to the brink of madness. People in town began talking about my story, warning one another about the sinister woods, where my love for building shacks had turned into a never-ending nightmare. The forest held its secrets close, and my life was forever changed. Autumn had arrived in all its splendor, and my remote work allowed me the freedom to choose my office for the day. The view of the woods from my back porch was tantalizing as the trees, wearing vibrant shades of red and gold, seemed to call me. The sky was a perfect shade of azure, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of fallen leaves. It was the type of day that demanded to be savored. With a smile, I set up my makeshift workspace, ranging my laptop, notepad, and a steaming cup of coffee on a rustic table. The birds were singing in harmonious delight, and the gentle rustle of the leaves beneath my feet provided the perfect soundtrack. I was ready to get some work done. While soaking in the natural beauty that surrounded me, the early weeks were splendid. I was more productive than ever. Inspired by the beauty of the season, the leaves fell around me in a glorious cascade, and I reveled in the beauty of nature's annual spectacle. The days were tranquil, and I couldn't have been happier with my choice to work outdoors. But then, the strangeness began. It was subtle at first, as if nature itself had started to play tricks on me. Objects would shift mysteriously, my pen rolling off the table as if nudged by an unseen hand. My laptop screen flickered occasionally, displaying ghostly images I couldn't quite decipher. One day, a shadow flickered across my screen. It wasn't my own, it was a wraith-like figure. Fleeting but distinctly human, I felt a shiver run down my spine. and I searched the woods for any sign of an intruder, but found none. It was unsettling, but I attributed it to my overactive imagination. As the weeks passed, the occurrences grew more bizarre. Shadows danced in the periphery of my vision, almost beckoning me to chase them into the woods. I'd occasionally hear whispers, as if the wind carried an inaudible conversation that teased my ears but refused to take form. I struggled to focus on my work, the eerie happenings creating an atmosphere of disquiet. Even the wildlife seemed to join the strange spectacle. Birds, instead of singing, produced haunting melodies that sent chills down my spine. Squirrels would freeze in their tracks, gazing at me with eerie, knowing eyes. A sense of being watched began to gnaw at me incessantly. My attempts to leave the porch and work elsewhere were futile. The inexplicable phenomena followed me indoors, and I started to fear for my sanity. The whispers grew louder and clearer, forming words that I couldn't comprehend. As autumn deepened into its final weeks, my mental state deteriorated further. I became a recluse, unable to escape the pervasive sense of being watched. My office had transformed from a sanctuary to a prison of my own mind. I couldn't distinguish between reality and the macabre fantasies that haunted my days. Finally, in the darkness of an autumn evening, I couldn't bear it any longer. Standing on the porch, I felt like I was at the brink of madness. I let out a primal scream, challenging the invisible forces that tormented me. The whispers became a deafening cacophony, and the shadows grew menacing. That's when I snapped. My mind unraveled like a frayed rope, and I fled from the porch, laughter echoing through the house. I was a man possessed, succumbing to the enigma of that fateful autumn. As I sought solace in padded walls and stared into the abyss of my own insanity, the inexplicable occurrences of that season haunted me for the rest of my life, a chilling reminder of a descent into madness that no one, not even the experts, could truly comprehend. The beautiful autumn had turned sinister, and my life had been forever scarred by the enigma that unfolded on my back porch. I cherish my daily jog as a means to stay fit and agile. Even in my late 60s, every morning, I laced up my running shoes and hit the neighborhood streets, determined to maintain my health and vitality. One autumn morning, my peaceful routine took a disturbing turn. The usual tranquility of the neighborhood was disrupted by the persistent sound of footsteps behind me. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it might be another jogger on the same route. But as the footsteps grew nearer and more relentless, I sensed something was amiss. My heart began to race, and I decided to glance over my shoulder. What I saw sent shivers down my spine. A tall man in a dark overcoat was following me, his gaze intent and menacing. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to keep my composure. I veered into a nearby park, hoping to lose my pursuer among the winding paths. To my dismay, he stayed close, maintaining an uncomfortably close distance. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I was determined not to be an easy target. As I rounded a bend in the path, I spotted a park ranger station in the distance. Drawing upon every ounce of strength, I sprinted toward it, shouting for help. A burly ranger named Jack quickly came to my aid. I pointed out my stalker, and the ranger confronted him. The police were called, and the stalker was taken into custody. However, as the man was led away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with me one last time. His gaze was filled with an unsettling, almost supernatural intensity. A shiver ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but feel that his malevolence transcended the confines of a jail cell. Late that night, as I lay in bed, the room grew cold and eerie. I heard faint whispers, and shadows seemed to dance in the corners. Panic surged as I realized that the stalker's presence was no longer confined to the physical world. The chilling truth was that his malevolent spirit had crossed over into my life, haunting my every step. From that day on, my once peaceful life turned into a relentless nightmare. The stalker's haunting presence became a dark, an ever-present specter, a reminder that true terror could persist, long after the physical threat had been removed. Under the dimly fading light of early evening, I laced up my sneakers and embarked on my daily jog along the familiar forest path. The serene trail meandered through the woods, with towering trees casting elongated shadows on the ground. This was my sanctuary, an escape from the daily chaos of life. As I picked up my pace, an unsettling sensation began to gnaw at me, a prickling unease in the pit of my stomach. It was as if someone was following me, lurking in the shadows. I brushed it off initially, attributing it to my imagination playing tricks on me in the eerie atmosphere. But the sensation refused to fade. Twigs snapped, and barely audible footsteps seemed to echo behind me. With growing unease, I finally glanced over my shoulder, and there, just at a distance, was a man. His face was concealed by a hood, and he was following me with sinister determination. Panic surged through me, and I increased my speed. I knew I couldn't keep running from this stranger. I had to do something about it. So, I made a quick decision and veered off the main path, sprinting deeper into the dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, and I hoped the labyrinth of nature would confuse my pursuer. I crouched behind a massive tree, hiding, my breath ragged and my heart pounding. I watched as the hooded figure passed, searching for me. Fear and determination swirled within me, and I knew I had to take action. With a sturdy branch in hand, I approached the man from behind, summoning all my strength. In a swift, instinctive motion, I struck him on the head. He collapsed, unconscious. Gasping for breath, I called the police, providing them with my location. They arrived swiftly, and I pointed them in the direction of the man, who had been stalking me, as they led him away. He regained consciousness and cast me a malevolent glare. I knew that by confronting my fears and taking action, I had thwarted a potentially perilous situation. I resumed my jog, more determined and cautious than ever. My forest sanctuary remained, but now, I had discovered a newfound strength within myself. I could face the darkness that might lurk in the shadows, and I would continue to do so, unafraid and resilient. James, a high school teenager and avid football player, was devoted to his sport. When his football gym coach recommended jogging as a way to stay in shape outside of practice, he embraced the idea. Little did he know that this decision would lead him down a path of horror. One evening, as he jogged through his quiet suburban neighborhood, he couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, as he sensed an eerie presence lurking just out of sight. He quickened his pace, looking over his shoulder nervously, but saw nothing unusual. As days turned into weeks, strange occurrences began to unfold. At home, James noticed objects moving on their own, doors creaking open, and whispers in the dark. In school, his classmates started acting strangely, as if under the influence of some unseen force. He couldn't escape the feeling that he was being watched. Even in the supposed safety of his own home, terrified, he decided to stop jogging altogether. He hoped that by avoiding the path where this nightmare had begun, he could put an end to the bizarre occurrences that were plaguing him. But it was too late. One fateful night, James was awakened by a chilling whisper in his ear. He sat up in bed to see a shadowy figure at the foot of his bed. The figure's eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. As it whispered, "You can't escape me," James screamed and turned on the light. But the figure had vanished. His parents rushed into the room, but they couldn't find any explanation for what he had experienced. The horror continued to intensify. James couldn't sleep, eat, or find solace anywhere. The whispering figure haunted his every move, and his life became a living nightmare. In the end, James was found lifeless in his room, a look of sheer terror etched on his face. The unexplainable horrors that had plagued him had taken their toll. His family and friends could only wonder at the malevolent force that had pursued him, even beyond the confines of his evening jogs. It was a chilly Thanksgiving evening, and John was on his way back from his family dinner. He wasn't too thrilled about the winter season that was coming, and the dry turkey had only added to his gloomy mood. As he drove along a quiet road, his trusty car suddenly sputtered and quit on him. Baffled, he tried to figure out what was wrong with it. The sun was setting, and darkness was creeping in. Car after car passed him by without a second glance, leaving him feeling more and more helpless. Just when his hope was fading, a regular-looking car pulled over beside him. A stranger stepped out, offering a friendly smile and a simple question, "Need a ride?" John was unsure but growing desperate, so he accepted the offer. The stranger's car took off surprisingly fast, leaving him bewildered. The guy wouldn't tell John his name, just calling himself Mr. Smith as they drove further into the night. John couldn't shake the eerie feeling in the car. The radio was silent, and the windows were so darkly tinted that he couldn't see outside. Smith's conversation got weirder, filled with cryptic remarks that made no sense, growing more and more uncomfortable. John finally asked, "Where are we going?" Mr. Smith just grinned and said, "Somewhere you've never been before." Tension mounted in the car, and John realized he was in a situation he had no control over. Fear was gnawing at him, and he just wanted to escape from this strange man. They ended up at a spooky, abandoned mansion deep in the woods. John's heart raced as he saw weird symbols and an unsettling vibe around the place. This night had become a real-life nightmare. Mr. Smith parked the car, turned to John, and whispered, "Welcome to your new home." Before John could react, Mr. Smith's smile turned into something wicked. Panic gripped John as he understood he had fallen into a trap. The story wraps up with John trapped inside the creepy mansion, tormented by a man whose intentions remained a terrifying mystery. The icy grasp of winter had taken a back seat to the chilling ordeal he found himself in. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful Thanksgiving night, when my world had turned into a living nightmare. The cold, dark memories of that evening still haunted me like a relentless ghost. I thought I would never make it out of that forsaken mansion alive, but somehow I had. And now, with winter bearing down on us, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder every time I heard an unusual sound. The ordeal had left me scarred, both mentally and physically. I had managed to escape Mr. Smith's clutches, but the encounter had cost me dearly. Nightmares kept me awake, my mind constantly replaying the sinister smile he had worn. When he'd whispered those chilling words, life had taken a turn for the surreal. I'd become obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the enigmatic Mr. Smith. I couldn't forget his dark and empty eyes, the secrets he held, and the symbols that marked that wretched mansion. It was like I was drawn to the darkness, unable to escape its pull. My days were filled with an unsettling sense of unease, and I had taken it upon myself to investigate. I combed through news articles and online forums, hoping to find any mention of Mr. Smith or the haunted mansion. I reached out to anyone who might have a clue about what happened that night, but answers remained elusive. The more I searched, the deeper I delved into the unknown, and the more I realized that there was a web of mysteries surrounding that mansion and its sinister owner. The winter season had arrived with its biting cold, but my heart was still colder. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Smith's ominous presence still lurked nearby, hidden in the shadows, waiting to strike again. I couldn't rest until I discovered the truth and brought an end to this nightmarish chapter of my life. In the heart of a cruel winter, I watched John from the shadows, my obsession with him growing stronger with each passing day. He thought he had escaped, that he had left me behind in that forsaken mansion. But little did he know that our twisted fate was inextricably linked. I reveled in the fear and torment that now consumed his life. As I peered into John's world, I couldn't help but chuckle at the desperate attempts to uncover the secrets of our encounter. He was a mere pawn in my sinister game, a game that I had orchestrated with meticulous precision. The mansion, with its eerie symbols and dark past, was my sanctuary, a place where I could carry out my sinister deeds in peace. I reveled in the suffering of those unfortunate souls who stumbled upon it, and John was just the latest addition to my collection. I had no intention of revealing my true identity or motives to him. My pleasure came from watching him unravel, from witnessing the paranoia and desperation that had taken hold of his once ordinary life. But I was not content with mere psychological torment. As winter's cold embrace grew tighter, I began to encroach further into his existence, leaving disturbing clues, cryptic messages, and unsettling encounters. His world had become a surreal nightmare, and there was no escape. As the snow blanketed the world in its icy grip, John's sanity continued to erode, and I reveled in the darkness that enveloped him. I was the puppeteer, and he danced to my malevolent tune. In the end, John's descent into madness was complete. The winter had swallowed him whole, just as I had intended. I watched from the shadows, my sinister grin hidden by the darkness, relishing in the knowledge that he was forever trapped in the twisted web I had spun. My reign of terror was far from over, for I was the true master of this chilling tale, and there was no escape from my sinister grasp. I step out of yoga class, feeling refreshed and peaceful. The sun is setting, casting a warm, golden glow on the streets. As I walk home, though, I notice peculiar occurrences. First, a black cat crosses my path, its eyes gleaming with an eerie intensity. Then, a flock of crows circles overhead, cawing loudly. A sense of unease washes over me. I quicken my pace and finally reach my doorstep. Just as I'm about to enter, I hear a faint, haunting melody. I turn to see a music box in the shape of a porcelain doll on my doorstep, playing by itself. I didn't own one. Shivers crawl up my spine as I step inside. Locking the door, I try to shake off the unsettling events, telling myself it's all in my head. As I head to my room, I find my reflection in the mirror, but it doesn't mimic my movements. A sinister grin creeps across my mirror self's face. Terrified, I bolt the door to my room. The lights flicker and go out. In the darkness, I hear that haunting music box melody. Louder and closer, a bone-chilling whisper echoes through the room. You can't escape, dear. I reach for my phone, trembling, and with its dim light, I see the porcelain doll standing at the foot of my bed. The story ends. As the whisper grows closer, and I realize I'm not alone in my room. On Halloween night, I eagerly prepared my kids for their annual trick-or-treating adventure. They were brimming with excitement, their costumes a colorful spectacle. We started visiting the nearby houses, and the evening was off to a joyous start. But as we approached the third house, a chilling sensation washed over me. The porch light flickered ominously, and the air grew bitterly cold. My children were undeterred, though, and bounded up to the door. The homeowner, an elderly woman, handed out candy with a trembling hand. I thanked her, but her eyes, filled with despair, locked onto mine. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something was amiss. We continued on our route, but every house we visited had a strange, unsettling atmosphere. Residents seemed disoriented, and the candy they gave was strangely misshapen. Suddenly, the night took a dark turn. My youngest child let out a cry, clutching their stomach in pain. I checked my other child, and they too complained of aching. Like something was twisting inside them, we rushed back home, panic welling up inside me. Their conditions worsened, and I called for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, but they couldn't explain the mysterious illness that had befallen my children. As Halloween night turned into a nightmarish ordeal, we had to end our trick-or-treating early. My children's health slowly improved, but the trauma of that night still haunts us. Sometimes, the darkness of Halloween can be far more sinister than we ever imagined. On Halloween night, I sit by my front door, a bowl of candy in my trembling hands. The joy of seeing kids in costumes reminds me of my youth, a time long gone. I eagerly await their laughter and excitement. The evening begins well. Children in a colorful array of costumes approach my porch. They thank me for the candy, their eyes shining with innocence. Each encounter a delightful nostalgia dot, but as the night wears on, a strange tension grips the air. The children's expressions turn eerie, their smiles unsettling. They take candy without speaking, their eyes boring into my soul. Suddenly, a chilling wind sweeps across my porch, extinguishing the jack-o'-lanterns. I recoil in fear as the children, their costumes now shrouded in shadow, reach out to me with gnarled, bony fingers in a panic. I slam the door shut, my heart racing. The night outside is quiet, too quiet. The memory of my youth, and the joy of Halloween now twisted into something horrifying. As I sit in the dark, I can't shake the feeling that those children weren't what they seemed. Their visit leaves me with a haunting sense of dread. A reminder that even in old age, Halloween can turn into a nightmarish ordeal. It's Halloween night, and my daughter, too young to trick or treat, is upset. She gazes longingly at the children in costumes, eager to join them. I reassure her that next year, she'll be ready. As the evening progresses, I decide not to hand out candy to trick-or-treaters, wanting to focus on my daughter. But fate has other plans. The doorbell rings, and my heart sinks. I open the door to find a group of kids, their costumes a mismatched jumble, like characters from different eras. They grin, trick or treat. I explain that I'm not giving out candy this year, but they continue to stand there, silent. Suddenly, a gust of wind sweeps through the room, extinguishing the jack-o'-lanterns. I shiver, offering one last plea for them to leave. Before my eyes, they begin to fade, their laughter echoing as they vanish into thin air. My daughter's eyes widen as the chill subsides. As I close the door, I hold my daughter close, realizing that even when we choose not to participate, Halloween's magic sometimes finds its own way into our lives. We look forward to her own trick-or-treating adventures next year, with a newfound understanding of the enchantment that surrounds this spooky night. On Halloween night, I, a dedicated elementary school teacher, excitedly shop for treats to surprise my young students. I envision their gleeful faces when they see the goodies. As I navigate the dimly lit store, I feel an eerie presence. Shelves rattle, and whispers fill the aisles. It's unsettling, but I dismiss it as imagination. With the cart piled high, I head to the checkout. The cashier's eyes, hollow and unblinking, make my skin crawl. He rings up the items in silence, each beep echoing ominously. I hurry to my car, but it won't start. Panic sets in as the darkness around me deepens. A flicker of movement catches my eye, and I see shadowy figures closing in. The figures, like wraiths, surround me. Their faces twisted and sinister, they reach out, demanding the treats I've purchased. I try to resist, but their grip is icy and relentless. I finally relent, offering the treats, and the figures dissipate. My car starts, and I speed away, my heart pounding. Arriving home, I'm drained and shaken, the treats I'd bought now a sinister reminder. The joyous celebration I'd planned for my students turns into a haunting experience I'll never forget. I can hardly contain my excitement as Halloween night approaches. My dad promised he'd take me to the ritzy neighborhood, where they give out king-size candy bars, the jackpot of all trick-or-treating prizes. I put on my spooky costume and eagerly hop into the car. The drive is filled with anticipation and chatter. We finally arrive at the posh neighborhood, its streets eerily empty. Lights from the grand mansions cast long, ominous shadows. We start going from house to house, but something feels off. The residents don't greet us with smiles, and the candy bowls are nearly empty. A sense of dread hangs in the air. My heart races as we reach a house at the end of a dimly lit cul-de-sac. The porch light flickers ominously. My dad hesitates, but rings the doorbell anyway. The door swings open, revealing a tall figure in a tattered cloak. Their face is hidden in the shadows, and a cold wind blows through the doorway. I grip my dad's hand, fear seizing me. The stranger extends a gnarled hand, offering candy. As my dad reaches for it, the figure's grip tightens, and with a bone-chilling whisper, they declare, "This is the price." Suddenly, the world distorts, and I find myself alone. My dad nowhere to be seen. The candy bars I hold are no longer treats, but something far more sinister. In a panic, I look around, realizing I'm trapped in a nightmarish realm. The house, the neighborhood, all distorted and nightmarish. My dad's voice echoes from somewhere, distant and pleading. As my terror deepens, the night stretches on, and I'm left alone in a chilling darkness, surrounded by nightmares. The king-size candy bars, now symbols of a horrifying Halloween that I'll never forget. On Halloween night, my friends and I decided to take a shortcut home through a dark graveyard. After a successful night of trick-or-treating, the moon cast eerie shadows on the tombstones. As we ventured deeper. As we walked, I tripped over a gnarled root and stumbled onto a grave. The earth beneath the grave seemed softer than it should be, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, a cold, bony hand erupted from the ground, grasping my ankle. My friends screamed in terror, trying to free me, but the grip was relentless. More hands erupted from the graves, and skeletal figures clawed their way to the surface. We fled, but the creatures pursued, their hollow eyes filled with hunger. In our panicked escape, one of my friends fell, and the creatures closed in, pulling them beneath the earth. The rest of us managed to escape the graveyard, but the chilling memory of our friend's horrifying fate haunted us forever. That Halloween night, I learned that some shortcuts can lead to places from which there is no return. In my late 20s, I thought I'd found the perfect date idea, a haunted house on Halloween night. I hoped it would be a thrilling, memorable experience. As we entered, laughter filled the air, and I held her hand, eager to share in the adventure. The haunted house was an old, decrepit mansion, and as we wandered deeper into its darkness, the atmosphere grew eerier. The creaking floorboards, the flickering candles, it all seemed perfectly spooky. But as we moved through a dimly lit corridor, I realized the scares were too intense. My date clung to my arm, her terrified eyes locking onto mine. Panic began to gnaw at my own heart. Suddenly, the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls closing in. We were trapped in a nightmarish maze of horrors. The mannequins lining the walls came to life, their twisted faces mocking our fear. Desperate to escape, we turned a corner, but it only led us deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew colder, and sinister whispers surrounded us. My date and I tried to run, but the hallway twisted and turned, leading us back to where we started. We were caught in an endless loop of terror. Finally, we stumbled upon a room filled with mannequins, all of them dressed like us. I watched in horror as the room's ceiling descended, slowly closing in on us. As the walls closed tighter, my date and I clung to each other, our screams blending with the echoes of the mannequins. The last thing I remember was the room becoming a suffocating darkness. Halloween night had taken an unexpected turn, and what started as a first date ended in a nightmarish ordeal from which we never escaped. It's Halloween night, and my friends and I are out trick-or-treating, laughter and excitement filling the air. As we approach a creepy old house, the porch light flickers, casting eerie shadows. Just as we reach the door, it creaks open, revealing a woman in a tattered wedding dress. She hands us candy, but her eyes hold a sorrowful gaze. Further down the street, we come across a decrepit, abandoned car. Its rusted doors suddenly swing open, and a pair of spectral children beckon us inside. We run, heartbeats thundering. In the distance, An unsettling figure stands beneath a flickering street light. Closer inspection reveals it's just a scarecrow. But it sends a shiver down our spines. As we continue, a thick fog rolls in, enveloping the neighborhood. We hear eerie whispers in the mist. Whispers that sound like the wind carrying secrets. The climax of our adventure comes when we spot a mysterious carnival tent on a vacant lot. The fortune teller inside predicts things about our futures. Chillingly accurate. We flee, our night now filled with an eerie sense of the unknown. I'm alone in this eerie gas station. The night silence broken only by the soft hum of fluorescent lights. A bitter October wind howls outside, rattling the windows. The radio plays a melancholic tune. As I count the minutes until the end of my shift, a shadowy figure approaches the counter. A chill runs down my spine, and I force a nervous smile. The customer's face is hidden beneath a hood, a mask of darkness. Their eyes, a deep, unsettling void. They slide a crumpled dollar bill towards me, their bony fingers trembling. The wind outside crescendos into a frenzied wail, and the lights flicker ominously. My heart races. With trembling hands, I reach for the bill. And as our fingers brush, I glimpse something beyond the hood, a ghastly, rotting visage. A face consumed by malevolence. I gasp, stepping back, knocking over a shelf. The lights fail, plunging us into inky blackness. Panic surges, and I scramble to my feet, fumbling for the flashlight. As the beam pierces the darkness, I see it, the figure. Inches from my face, those empty eyes inches from mine. The hooded specter whispers, "Time to pay the toll." Before vanishing into the abyss. I stand there, shaken, alone in the silent gas station. The wind outside settles, and the lights return, as if nothing ever happened. But the terror still lingers, this Halloween night. Beware the gas station at the crossroads. You never know who or what will come to collect. On a chilly Halloween night in the eerie town of Willowbrook, a father named Tom stood at the threshold of an adventure he'd been eagerly awaiting. His son, Timmy, just turned 5, was dressed as Dracula, his little heart pounding with excitement. Tom had adorned their house with cobwebs, jack-o'-lanterns, and a giant inflatable ghost, all in celebration of Timmy's very first Halloween. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the world was transformed into a realm of shadows and secrets. The streets were lined with houses adorned in sinister decorations, and the electricity of Halloween was palpable. Father and son set off, their footsteps echoing through the night. Their first stop was the ancient home of Mrs. Henderson, where the porch light flickered ominously as she handed Timmy a candy apple. A sudden gust of wind howled, raising goosebumps on their skin. The next destination was the notorious Peterson mansion, a place that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. They climbed the creaky stairs to the front door, where a figure, Mrs. Peterson, adorned in a witch's hat, handed Timmy a handful of candies. Just as they turned to leave, they heard eerie whispers from inside and caught a glimpse of glowing eyes lurking in the shadows. Undeterred, they moved on. A mysterious fog rolled in, obscuring their vision and leaving them disoriented. The street transformed into a shadowy labyrinth. Timmy clung tightly to his father's hand. In the distance, they noticed a faint glow from the Whitman house, an old Victorian mansion. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a tall, shadowy figure dressed as the Grim Reaper. Fear gripped them as they hesitated, but the figure handed Timmy a treat, and they hastily retreated. Yet, as they ventured further, they realized the cloaked figure was following them. Panic set in as they quickened their pace, but the relentless pursuit continued. Heavy footsteps echoed ominously, pushing them into a dead-end alley. Terrified and trapped, they were on the brink of despair, when the Grim Reaper revealed himself to be Timmy's mischievous older cousin, Alex, playing a Halloween prank. Laughter filled the alley as the fog dissipated and tension eased. With racing hearts, Tom and Timmy resumed their journey. Knowing that Halloween night was full of suspense and surprise, they approached the ominous, darkened house at the end of the street, ready for the mysteries and adventures that awaited them. But they couldn't anticipate the chilling suspense that lay ahead. On that ominous Halloween night, cloaked in shadows, I, the enigmatic figure, lurked in the corners of Willowbrook, my presence shrouded in eerie mystery. The town knew me as the Grim Reaper, and fear was my companion. My eyes, hidden behind the abyss of my hood, followed the unsuspecting father, Tom, and his young son, Timmy, as they ventured into the abyss of the unknown. I watched with delight, as their anticipation intensified with each echoing footstep, their mirth turning into apprehension. The decorations at Tom's house were mere invitations to the darkness I embodied. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered eerily, and the inflatable ghost beckoned them toward their inevitable encounter with me. As they set off into the ink-black night, their laughter was but a distant memory, replaced by the disconcerting silence that followed them. Their first stop was the dwelling of Mrs. Henderson, her frail silhouette serving as a preamble to their descent into my realm. With the handover of the candy apple, the trap was set. A wicked howl of the wind sent a shiver down their spines, and my presence grew more palpable. The Peterson mansion, a place of infamy, awaited them like a spider's lair. The creaking stairs and the foreboding, witch-like figure, Mrs. Peterson, were mere puppets in my sinister show. Their dread mounted as they heard the eerie whispers, for it was my voice that sent chills down their spines, and my glowing eyes that watched from the shadows. They moved on, oblivious to the trap closing around them. The mysterious fog, a creation of my malevolence, enshrouded them. In the darkness, they lost their way. Timmy clinging desperately to his father's hand, the world turned into a labyrinth, and I reveled in their disorientation. The Whitman house, with its faint glow, was the next act in my dark play. As the door creaked open, revealing my figure as the Grim Reaper, their fear was the culmination of my art. The sinister suspense was nearly unbearable, and the sweet taste of trepidation coursed through me. As they accepted my candy, never suspecting my true intentions, I followed them as they ventured deeper into the night. Their panic, their heavy footsteps, and their dread fueled my satisfaction. I led them to a dead-end alley, a place of no escape, where their terror peaked. Their despair was my masterpiece, and I was on the brink of revealing myself when, suddenly, it was time to end my malevolent charade. Laughter filled the alley as the fog lifted, their relief a mere illusion. Timmy's older cousin, Alex, emerged from the shadows, his Halloween prank complete. Their hearts still raced, but I, the Grim Reaper, retreated into the shadows, content with the fear I'd instilled. As Tom and Timmy continued their journey, the mysteries and horrors of Halloween night continued to unfold, but they were oblivious to the malevolence that lurked just beyond their sight. The suspense was unrelenting, and the true horrors of the night remained concealed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Timmy had grown up, but he could never forget that fateful Halloween night from his childhood. It haunted him, and the mere thought of Halloween sent shivers down his spine. But now, he was faced with a daunting challenge, taking his own child out for their very first Halloween. A lifetime of memories and fears came rushing back. As he prepared for the night, it was a gloomy October evening, and Timmy's young son, Danny, was eager to don his adorable Dracula costume, just as his father had done so many years ago. The anticipation in Danny's eyes mirrored the excitement that Timmy once held, but it was also marred by his father's lingering dread. The evening began innocently enough as they stepped out into the chilly autumn air. The wind whispered through the trees, the leaves rustling like phantom whispers. The streets were adorned with eerie decorations, just as he remembered from his childhood. The jack-o'-lanterns flickered menacingly, and the shadows seemed to dance to an eerie tune. They approached the house where Mrs. Henderson once resided, and the sight of a candy apple sent a chill down Timmy's spine. He had hoped to shield Danny from the horrors of Halloween, but the past had a way of creeping back. He smiled weakly as Danny accepted the treat with glee. The night was still young, and Danny's laughter was infectious. The atmosphere was filled with a mixture of excitement and dread, much like the anticipation before a storm. As they continued their journey, Timmy couldn't help but glance back, half expecting the sinister figure of the Grim Reaper to follow them once again. The Peterson mansion loomed ahead, a place of darkness and secrets. The creaking stairs and the mysterious figure that handed them candy seemed surreal, as if the past was being replayed. The eerie whispers from the house filled the air, and Timmy's heart raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching, waiting to ensnare them once again. They continued down the shadowy streets, and suddenly, an ominous fog rolled in, obscuring their surroundings. Panic welled up within Timmy as the world transformed into a nightmarish labyrinth. Danny clung tightly to his father's hand, mirroring Timmy's grip on his own father's hand from years past. The fog enveloped them like a sinister shroud, and the dread intensified. The neighborhood seemed to have transformed into a haunted maze, and the streets were no longer familiar. Timmy couldn't escape the memories of that Halloween night that had shaped his phobia. The Whitman house appeared in the distance, its glow a beckoning siren call. The Grim Reaper's figure that had haunted Timmy's past was now just an ordinary person, handing out treats. He sighed with relief as they accepted the candy, hoping that this Halloween night would be different. Danny's joy was a stark contrast to Timmy's lingering dread, but the familiar feeling of being pursued returned as they continued their journey. Timmy couldn't shake the sense that something dark was lurking behind them, mirroring the dread that had haunted his own Halloween past. His heart raced as they quickened their pace, the heavy footsteps echoing ominously. It felt like a nightmare repeating itself. They reached a dead-end alley, the same one that had trapped him and his father years ago. Timmy's fear reached a crescendo, and he knew he couldn't allow Danny to experience what he had. The alley was a sinister trap, just as it had been on that night that had scarred him. Timmy turned to Danny, his voice trembling as he confessed, "We have to leave, Danny. This night it's not what it seems." Danny, his innocent eyes wide with confusion, reluctantly agreed to go home. As they retreated, the fog lifted, but Timmy couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching them. The past was never far behind, and the horrors of that Halloween night had resurfaced. Timmy and Danny arrived home, shaken and anxious. Timmy couldn't help but feel that they had narrowly escaped something malevolent, and he knew that Halloween would never be the same for him. Now, he lay awake at night, fearing what lurked in the darkness. The anxiety never left him, and he couldn't escape the sinister feeling that his past would come back to haunt him once again. The story of that Halloween night remained unfinished, and the suspense of the present left him paralyzed with dread. The echoes of that Halloween night had reached into the present, and Timmy knew that his fears would never truly be put to rest. Halloween had always been one of my favorite holidays. The thought of spending it with my 6-year-old son, Lucas, filled me with excitement and nostalgia as I helped him into his Spider-Man costume. I couldn't help but smile at his eager anticipation. "Dad, is it time yet?" Lucas asked, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Not yet, buddy," I replied, adjusting the mask to make sure he could see properly. "We'll wait until it gets a little darker." The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I decided it was finally time for our adventure to begin, and we set out into the cool, autumn evening. As we strolled down the familiar streets, the decorations filled the neighborhood with an eerie charm. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered with an otherworldly light, and ghouls and skeletons dangled from porches. But the joy of trick-or-treating was soon replaced by an unease I couldn't quite shake. Lucas was excited, darting from house to house, his bucket filling with candy. But I couldn't help but notice the uneasiness of our neighbors. Their smiles seemed forced, and their eyes held a shadow of dread. I chalked it up to the darkness and my own overactive imagination. We continued our rounds, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, the streetlights cast eerie glows on the silent houses. The air grew chilly, and I tightened my grip on Lucas's hand. It was as if the world around us had shifted, and the familiar streets had taken on a sinister quality. As we approached one particular house, the yard was filled with scarecrows. Lucas hesitated for a moment, but the promise of more candy spurred him forward. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in a witch's costume. She handed Lucas a candy bar, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Happy Halloween," she whispered, her voice quivering. We hurried away from the house, and Lucas turned to me with wide eyes. "Dad, she was weird." "I know, buddy," I replied, trying to sound reassuring, "but it's all in good fun. Let's keep going." The unease continued to gnaw at me. As we moved through the neighborhood, the houses became more dilapidated, and the decorations grew darker. At one point, we encountered a group of children in terrifying masks, their laughter echoing with an unsettling edge. As we rounded a corner, a particularly imposing mansion loomed before us. It was shrouded in mist, and the wrought iron gate creaked ominously. Lucas, undeterred, tugged on my hand and led me up the cobblestone path. I hesitated for a moment, then followed him inside. The interior was dimly lit, and the air was heavy with an oppressive chill. The walls were adorned with macabre paintings, and cobwebs draped the furniture. It was a haunted house, and it had clearly seen better days. "Lucas, maybe we should go back outside," I suggested, my unease growing. But Lucas was determined to explore, and his young curiosity pulled me deeper into the mansion. We ventured into the basement, where the darkness was absolute. I turned on my phone's flashlight, revealing a room filled with antique dolls. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow us, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Lucas, however, was entranced by the dolls and picked one up, causing me to jump at the sudden creaking of the floorboards behind us. As I turned to investigate, I was met with a sight that would haunt me for the rest of my life. A figure, clad in tattered rags, stood in the corner of the basement. Its face was hidden beneath a disheveled mop of hair, and it emitted a low, guttural growl. "Dad," Lucas whimpered, clutching the doll tightly. Without a second thought, I grabbed my son's hand and fled from the basement. The creature pursued us, its unearthly wails echoing through the house. We burst out of the front door and back into the night. Gasping for breath, we stumbled down the cobblestone path, and didn't stop running until we reached our familiar neighborhood. The houses were no longer shrouded in darkness, and the decorations had returned to their cheerful, spooky charm. My heart pounded as I knelt down to catch my breath, but Lucas clung to the doll he had taken from the haunted mansion. "Lucas, we need to go home," I said, my voice quivering. As we made our way back, the night seemed to stretch on forever. Our footsteps were punctuated by eerie whispers on the wind, and I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, fearing the specter from the mansion would be right behind us. Finally, we reached our doorstep, and I ushered Lucas inside. I locked the door and turned on all the lights. The events of the night had left us both shaken, and I couldn't help but wonder if what we had encountered was real, or just a Halloween prank gone horribly wrong. Lucas sat on the couch, clutching the doll he had taken from the mansion's basement. I took it from him, examining it closely. Its glassy eyes seemed to watch me, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. The night had taken a toll on us, and I decided to put Lucas to bed early. I tucked him in, and as I turned to leave the room, he whispered, "Dad, don't leave the room, I'm scared." I sat on the edge of his bed, reassuring him that he was safe. But as I glanced out of the bedroom window, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. In the yard, beneath the moon's pale light, the figure from the mansion stood, its grotesque form illuminated by the eerie glow. I reached for my phone to call the police. But as I looked back at Lucas, the doll he had taken from the basement was now sitting on his nightstand, staring at me with those glassy eyes. The wails of the creature echoed through the house once more, and I realized that the horror of that Halloween night was far from over. As I sat there, paralyzed with fear, The room grew colder, and the whispers on the wind seemed to seep through the walls. The darkness outside pressed in, and the disturbing truth became clear. The sinister events of that Halloween night were not a mere prank, but a nightmare that had followed us home, and it was determined to claim us both. As I stood in my neighbor's living room, clutching the shiny antique watch they had entrusted me to care for, a shiver ran down my spine. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me with the task of watering their plants and taking care of their 2 dogs, Max and Bella. It seemed like a simple favor, but the eerie silence of their home sent chills down my spine. The Holloway residence, a grand old Victorian house, had always seemed a bit unsettling to me. The creaky wooden floors and dimly lit rooms made the atmosphere unsettling, even in the daylight. As I began watering the numerous potted plants in the conservatory, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The rustling leaves and shadows played tricks on my senses, making every mundane sound seem sinister. The dogs, Max and Bella, were equally unsettling. They were unusually quiet, and their eyes seemed to follow me with a peculiar intensity. I chalked it up to them not being familiar with me, but something about their behavior didn't sit right. Over the next couple of days, the unease in the house continued to intensify. Each night, I was plagued by strange sounds, whispers in the walls, faint, unexplained knocking, and the sensation of unseen eyes in every corner. I tried to convince myself that it was just an old house settling, but I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I wasn't alone. One evening, as I was preparing dinner in the dimly lit kitchen, the antique watch on the countertop started ticking loudly on its own. Its hands began to move in a chaotic frenzy, the second hand spinning uncontrollably. I had no explanation for this bizarre occurrence. The watch had been motionless for the entire time I'd been there. Then, the dogs started barking furiously. I rushed into the living room to find them both standing at the entrance to the basement, growling and snarling. I hesitated, my heart pounding, before mustering the courage to investigate. Descending into the shadowy depths of the basement, I was met with an unsettling sight. A framed, old photograph of the Holloways had been turned upside down, and the floor was covered in old, forgotten belongings, dusty books, yellowing newspapers, and ancient toys. It was as if the basement itself had a vendetta against the family. The unease that had been festering over the days reached a fever pitch, and I realized that I had to confront the source of this terror. I decided to search for answers in the attic, a place I had avoided thus far. The climb to the attic was steep, and the dust-covered stairs creaked ominously underfoot. As I entered the dim, cobweb-ridden space, I stumbled upon a wooden chest hidden in the corner. I carefully opened it, revealing a collection of journals written by Mr. Holloway himself. With trembling hands, I began to read. Mr. Holloway had been conducting strange experiments, trying to communicate with the dead, to bridge the gap between life and the afterlife. He believed that the watch I held was the key, a conduit to the other side. He had warned himself in his journal about the consequences of his reckless endeavors. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. The bizarre happenings in the house had nothing to do with the supernatural. It was all due to the dark experiments of the previous owner. It was as if his malevolent energy still lingered in the house. I couldn't stay there any longer. I hastily locked the attic and rushed to the front door, the antique watch still in my hand. As I stepped outside into the cool night, I heard a blood-curdling scream emanating from within the house. I turned to see the lights flicker, and the silhouette of a man in the attic window. It was Mr. Holloway, or what remained of him. His ghostly figure twisted and contorted as he reached out toward me, the watch levitating in front of him. I fled from the house, the terror and the haunting gaze of the Holloway specter forever etched in my mind. To this day, I can't escape the feeling that the antique watch still has a hold on me, and I wonder if the Holloways ever truly left their home, or if they remain trapped in that eerie Victorian house forever, seeking to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. The moment we stepped into our newly purchased vacation home, in the quiet town of Northwood, I knew we had made a big mistake. My high school sweetheart, Sarah, and I had just tied the knot. And in a whirlwind of excitement, we had bought this house without ever setting foot inside. We had seen pictures online and hoped for the best. But the reality was far from what we had envisioned. The place was old, and the creaking floors and peeling wallpaper told a tale of years of neglect. The musty smell hung in the air, and I couldn't help but wonder what had possessed us to make such an impulsive decision. But Sarah, ever the optimist, assured me we could fix it up and make it our cozy retreat. We started with the kitchen, which looked like it had been frozen in the 1970s. The avocado green appliances clashed with the dingy, yellowing linoleum floor. As we tore off the old wallpaper and repainted, I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of our amateur efforts. The cabinets weren't level, and the paint dripped in places, giving the room a quirky, homemade charm. One evening, as we were trying to enjoy a homemade meal in our new dining room, a sudden leak in the ceiling threatened to ruin our dinner. Buckets and towels were scattered around. As we frantically tried to contain the water, it wasn't a pleasant experience, but it was a shared moment of panic that brought us closer. The town of Northwood, although picturesque, had its own share of oddities. The locals were friendly but peculiar, often sharing strange stories about the history of our house. Tales of a reclusive artist who had lived here and painted bizarre murals on the walls added to the eeriness. One night, as we were snuggled in bed, we heard a loud, rhythmic tapping from the attic. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured upstairs to investigate. It turned out to be just a loose shutter that the wind was playing tricks with, but for a moment, I couldn't help but feel like a character in a suspenseful movie. Our first few weeks in Northwood were filled with a series of unexpected inconveniences, power outages during storms, wildlife invasions in the attic, and a plumbing disaster that had us calling for professional help. Yet, we persisted, working together to turn our vacation home into a place that truly felt like our own. As the months passed, the house transformed from a run-down relic into a cozy haven. We laughed about the mishaps and relished the quiet moments by the fireplace. Sarah's love and determination had turned this house into a place we could genuinely call home. Our Northwood adventure taught us that sometimes the best memories are born out of the most unexpected situations. Though our journey began with doubts and kooky mishaps, it led us to a place of love, laughter, and a shared commitment to making the best out of any situation. In the end, our quirky vacation home had become a symbol of our enduring love, and we wouldn't have had it any other way. Amidst the quirks of the house and town, there was a distinct charm to Northwood that we couldn't deny. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and the local diner served the best pie you'd ever taste. The odd stories about our house seemed to add to its character rather than deter us. One afternoon, we decided to explore the woods surrounding our new home. The dense trees cast eerie shadows, and the silence was deafening. Our adventure took an unexpected turn when we stumbled upon an old, rusted bicycle half buried in the underbrush. It was an artifact of a bygone era, and it was difficult to imagine who might have left it there. As we continued our walk, we discovered an abandoned treehouse, seemingly untouched for decades. Sarah and I climbed up, the rickety steps creaking with every movement. Inside, we found a journal filled with cryptic sketches and writings. It was clear that someone had spent a lot of time up there, lost in their thoughts. Back in the house, we couldn't shake the eerie feeling that we were living in a place with a past that we had yet to unravel. The attic was another source of intrigue. Old trunks and boxes contained forgotten relics, each with its own story. One day, we found a collection of vintage postcards from around the world, as well as a stack of letters written in a language we couldn't decipher. The town of Northwood itself had its mysteries. The locals spoke of an abandoned mansion at the edge of the forest, the Beaumont House, which had been deserted for generations. Rumors of it being haunted added to its allure, and we decided to pay it a visit. The journey through the dense woods led us to the overgrown estate. It was a grand structure, but time and nature had taken their toll. We ventured inside, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The fading wallpaper and broken furniture made it clear that no one had lived here in decades. The place was filled with dust and decay, yet there was an undeniable beauty to its ruins. We discovered a hidden chamber, its door half ajar. Inside, we found a collection of old paintings, each one more bizarre and intriguing than the last. They were the works of the reclusive artist, whose stories we had heard. The images were unsettling, with strange, distorted figures and landscapes. It was as if the artist had tried to capture some elusive truth, even if it led to madness. One night, as we sat in the living room, the power went out. It was a common occurrence in Northwood during storms. But this time, something felt different. We lit candles and huddled together, listening to the howling wind and the branches scratching at the windows. It was then that we heard a faint, ghostly melody, as if a piano was playing in the distance. The sound seemed to come from the attic. We made our way up, the stairs creaking beneath us, and as we entered the attic, the music grew louder, but there was no one there. It was as if the very walls of the house were playing this haunting tune. With each passing day, we delved deeper into the mysteries of Northwood. We visited the local library, where an elderly librarian shared tales of the town's history. It was here that we uncovered the story of the Beaumont house and the tragic life of the reclusive artist. The artist had believed that the creative process was a gateway to another world, a way to glimpse the unknown. As we explored the town, we began to notice strange occurrences, mysterious lights in the forest at night, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and whispers that were just beyond our understanding. The townsfolk spoke of the woods as a place of secrets and hidden knowledge. Our journey took a more ominous turn when we stumbled upon a hidden room in the basement of our vacation home. The room was small and windowless, its walls covered in strange symbols and cryptic writings. It sent shivers down our spines and left us with an unsettling feeling that we were not alone in the house. One night, we decided to visit the Beaumont house again, this time with flashlights and a sense of trepidation. As we entered the decaying mansion, we heard a soft, mournful wail. It echoed through the empty halls, sending chills down our spines. We followed the sound to a room filled with old, dusty mirrors, and in one of them, we saw a reflection that was not our own, a fleeting, ghostly figure that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Back at our vacation home, the strange occurrences continued. Objects moved on their own, and shadows seemed to dance in the corners of our vision. The eerie music from the attic played more frequently, and sometimes it was accompanied by a soft, disembodied voice, as if someone were singing a mournful lullaby. Our sense of unease grew, but we were determined to uncover the truth behind these mysteries. We reached out to some of the older townsfolk, hoping they could shed light on the strange happenings. They spoke of a hidden well in the forest, a place of ancient rituals and a connection to the otherworldly. As we ventured into the forest to find the well, the atmosphere grew increasingly eerie. The trees seemed to close in on us, and the air was heavy with an unexplained tension. We finally stumbled upon the well, a decrepit stone structure covered in moss and surrounded by faded, withered stones. It was a place of power, and the townsfolk believed it held the key to unlocking the secrets of Northwood. One night, as we sat in our dimly lit living room, the power went out again, and the eerie music from the attic began. The whispers and shadows grew more intense, and we realized we were in the midst of something far beyond our understanding. We decided to leave Northwood, to escape the mysteries that seemed to entangle us, but the town had other plans. As we packed our belongings, the forest itself seemed to resist our departure. The trees appeared to close in on us, their branches blocking our path. The wind whispered secrets in a language we couldn't comprehend. It was as if Northwood had decided we were not meant to leave. Desperation set in as we tried to escape the oppressive force that held us there. The well in the forest called to us, and we decided to confront it, to unlock the secrets it held. We returned to the ancient stone structure, determined to understand the truth of Northwood. As we stood before the well, we felt a powerful energy emanating from it. The air was charged with an otherworldly force, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. We looked at each other, knowing that there was no turning back. With trembling hands, We reached into the well and touched the water. It was icy cold, and in that moment, we felt a surge of knowledge rush into our minds. We understood the mysteries of Northwood, the artist's obsession with the unknown, and the connection between the well and the eerie music that had haunted us. But this knowledge came at a price. As we turned to leave, we heard a soft, mournful melody, and the ground beneath us began to shake. The well itself seemed to come to life, its stones shifting and rearranging. It was as if Northwood itself had awakened, and it was not willing to let us go. The forest closed in on us, its trees reaching out with gnarled branches, and the shadows enveloped us. We were pulled into the earth, becoming a part of the ancient, hidden knowledge that had haunted Northwood for centuries. Our story became one of the mysteries of the town, a tale of two outsiders who had dared to uncover the secrets of Northwood. We became a part of the well, forever bound to the ancient power that had drawn us in. Our existence merged with the eerie music, the whispers, and the shadows that continued to haunt the town. In the end, our love and curiosity had led us into a world beyond our understanding, and Northwood had claimed us as its own. The town of secrets and mysteries had decided that we were never meant to leave, and so we remained a part of the enigma that was Northwood, forever entangled in its web of the unknown.